Hello and welcome to our first session in the BBC Microbit series produced by Aberystwyth University. My name is Tally Roberts and I am an outreach officer at the university. This session is a basic introduction to what a BBC Microbit is and an introduction to the MakeCode programming language used to program them. So let's get started with the very first question of what is a microbit? What is a BBC Microbit? What is this thing that we're talking about? Well, it is a small computer. It is small enough to fit in your hand. It has been released by the BBC in conjunction with Microsoft and is now readily available for schools across the UK to use in the classroom. We choose to study this as a good starting point due to its affordability. So even if you don't have them in schools, you can easily get hold of them and program them in your home. So what is this computer? Well, it is a bundle of input and output that can all be programmed. So let's break that down and work out what I mean by those phrases. So what do I mean by input and output? A very, very simplified version, which I have here, is that input is information going into a computer, output is the information coming out of a computer. So let's take the computer that you might be watching this on right now. Let's take a desktop computer that you might have at home or a laptop computer that you might have in school and talk about what the inputs and outputs for those are. So for a start, you're watching this video. For this video to be recorded, it is using a camera. In this case, it's a recording of my screen. So the input is that camera. The output is your screen. Your screen is giving you that information. When I wrote the slides that I am going through in this, I used a keyboard and a mouse for the design and the input of the text. So keyboard and mice on your computers are input devices. And then that all goes in and I can see what it's doing again through that output that is the screen. Let's go for a different example. You're currently listening to me, or you may have the subtitles on, I don't know. But if you are listening to me, you are listening to a voice that's been recorded via a microphone. So the microphone is input, and you're listening to it through speakers or headphone speakers. So speakers are your output. I'm hoping that this is making sense so far. But what relevance does this have to our microbit? Well, you see, the microbit has a lot of different inputs and outputs. Here we go. So you have on the front, you have as labeled here, a touch logo. That is a touch sensor. So that's input. It's information as to whether or not you're touching it. It's got 25 red LED lights. Yes, they are only red. You cannot change the color of those, but you've got 25 LED lights on the front. And these are like the screen for the microbit. So it's an output. It's giving you information that we've told it to give you. And that links back to program, which we'll be looking at in a moment. You've also got the microphone. Like the computer, it has a microphone. So that's listening. So that's an input. You also have those two buttons, buttons A and B, either side of the screen. They are listening for you for when you press them, so they are an input. On the back, there's a lot more other bits and pieces on here as well. You've got the radio antenna that allows it to send and receive messages. So that one's slightly unusual. So receiving them is input, sending them is output. It's two directions. So it's both input and output, the radio antenna. We also have the speaker, which is your sound output, like your headphones or the speakers on your computer at the moment. Also has a compass, which is actually an input device. It's inputting information as to which way is north and being able to tell you which way it's facing. And something called an accelerometer, which, as you can see in the writing underneath, hopefully, is a movement sensor. So it knows which way up the microbit is and how fast it's moving and can give you some additional information about what's going on with the microbit's location and position. And then the last thing on there is the pins. They're at the bottom, and you can see there it's got a couple of arrows saying even more inputs and outputs. Basically, those pins at the bottom allow us to attach extra sensors or extra output. These sessions will be looking at different things that we can attach to the microbit. And in fact, the next topic after this in the electronics, you really will be exploring just how many different devices can be plugged in. So Having flown through that, I should also highlight that there are the important connectors as well. So if you're using your own microbit during this or a school microbit, there is the USB connector. That's where you can plug in the USB cable to your computers to download programs. It also provides power to the microbit if you don't have a battery pack. There is then the battery socket on the back. So if you do have the battery pack, you can plug it in there and have your microbit with battery power away from your computer. And it's got a reset button that allows you to restart the program that you've put onto your microbit. Also, if you hold that down, it turns off your microbit, so you're not wasting battery with it running when you don't want it to. And the other label there that we didn't cover was the processor. That is just showing you the actual brains of the computer. That is the processor that's processing all the instructions and information that it's getting. So now on to that second thing. So I've covered the input and output, but what about the program? What is a program? It is a set of instructions given to a computer. If something does not have a program, the inputs and outputs, it doesn't matter how many you have for it, they will not do anything. They can't do anything because you've not instructed it what to do or how to do it. So, for example, if you were to use a light sensor, and yes, there is a light sensor on the microbit as well. I don't think that was covered in the last slide. It means that it can detect what the light level is. That is an input. It knows when it's light. It knows when it's dark. But if we don't write a program, a set of instructions for what to do or to even use that input, it won't do anything. It doesn't matter if it knows it's dark because you've not told it to do anything when it's dark. I'm hoping that this will make sense as we go through, because what we're going to do now is, having gone through a quick run through of what a microbit is physically, let's now look at the software. Software, I mean the program we're going to be using to program. That's always nice combination of program words there. So there are three options that you have when you're programming a microbit. For beginners, I would advise that you start with MakeCode, just simply because that is a block-based language. There is another option of, if you are more experienced at programming, there is now a Python editor available for the microbit. And if you are working at home or on your own computers, you can download an offline app that allows you to do this without an internet connection. Or your parents might want to do that for you, or the school may have already done it on school computers. So what is this software that I'm talking about? Well, let me load up the screen. Give me a moment. So if I go to the online in-browser version, you get this menu screen here. This is makecode.microbit.org. And you'll see yours will probably be blank here unless you've done some programming with the microbits before. These are my previous programs on here. If you look underneath, there's some tutorials. So if you want to get ahead and get started on learning a bit more about the microbit, you can have a go at some of these tutorials here. I wouldn't worry about the stuff further down because that's a bit more advanced, and we'll be covering some of those. By the end of these sessions, you'll easily be able to complete most of the things that are on this menu then. So for today, I'm just going to show you the basics of how this program works. So we'll start a new project. I'm going to call it session 1 and create. You can call it whatever you want. And it loads up this screen. Now, this is our programming screen. So what we have here in the top left is a simulator. So you don't even have to have an actual microbit to test your program. You can test your program as you're writing it in the simulator. So at the moment, you can see it's chosen a red microbit for some reason. It might be a different color for you. And you've got this microbit that's doing nothing because there is no program yet. Now, this is a block-based programming language, which is kind of like Scratch or the Lego Spike programming languages. It's all made up of a menu of blocks that you can slide in and out and click in and out of the blocks to make your program, make your set of instructions. Now, it will give you these two blocks to start with. Now, what are these two blocks? Well, this here, anything you put in here on the on start will happen once when you start the microbit. So let's have it go. I'm going to actually shorten that slightly. Let's have it say hi and then show us a picture. Let's go for the rubber duck. Okay, so now I've got an on start. You'll see here it's showing in the simulator, hi, rubber duck. There we go. Now that will only go through once. The forever loop, this forever here, this is where the most of your program is going to go. So once it's finished this, it's looking for something in here. If it can't find anything, it just stays on that symbol there. So if I was to move this now, and in fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change that icon. I'm going to change it to a big heart, and then I'm going to get a different icon and change it to a little heart. And let's see what happens. We'll now see we get high, get a big heart, little heart. There we go. So if I was to then do the same in forever loop afterwards, I want you to have a quick think. What do you think's going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? I'm actually also going to take those bits out there. So what's the difference? What's going to happen is when we start it up, it's going to say hi because that's on the on start, and then it's going to do the forever loop. Now, I'm hoping you can see why it's called forever. What it is doing is reading these instructions over and over and over, and we'll continue to do so until we either stop it, turn it off, or it runs out of power. So that is what the forever does. It repeats everything in it, whereas the on start does it once when you turn your microbit on. So the exercises for this session will take you through making some basic programs and starting to just get used to moving these blocks around. You don't need to worry about breaking anything. A simple reason is it's an online simulator. It's all here. If something goes wrong, it will tell you something has gone wrong. If you start to use different things that you can't see on the simulator, I mean, you've got button A and you've got button B. If you wanted to be able to press both A and B at the same time, you cannot do that in the simulator because your mouse can only click on one button at a time. But there's no need to worry because if we look in the input menu, because these buttons are input, we can use an on button A and B pressed. As soon as we include that block, you'll notice that your simulator's changed and it's now got a third button. Now that button isn't actually on the microbit, but what it does is it does the same if you watch what's happening as pressing both A and B at the same time. So you can test it in the simulator. The same goes for, if I take that back out again, the same goes for if you wanted to do something when you shook the microbit. Okay, now it moves. Now we can actually move the microbit within the simulator, or we can click on this shake button, which registers the same as being shaken. Okay, what about inputs? Because the simulator doesn't have a light sensor. It's not going to be able to tell you whether it's light or dark. So how can we test an input for something like a light sensor or the sound sensor? So what I'm actually going to do is going to go for sound first. So on a loud sound, and we can tell it then to do something inside the program. And you'll see in the simulator, we now have this bar with a sound thing on. And that allows us to say, right, no sound, really loud sound, really low sound, silence. And then we can drag it different levels so we can test the program and test in the simulator for that. Okay, so hopefully after this session, you'll be doing those exercises and get an idea as to how these blocks all to go together. And by the end, you should be able to start writing some basic programs that will allow you to interact with the microbit and have it do different things. In the next session, we shall be looking at variables and if statements, which are necessary to make more complicated programs. So thank you very much for listening. We hope that this was informative and helped you get an idea as to what a BBC microbit is and to get you started on playing with the programming language on makecode.microbit.org.